The morning of February 14th, 1929, arrives cold and harsh in Chicago. Snow covers the streets in a soft blanket that tricks the eye, making the city look peaceful as it wakes up to another day of predation and chaos. The temperature sits at about 18 degrees, and the wind cuts through the alleys on the north side like a sharp blade. At 2122 North Clark Street, a plain brick building holds the SMC Cartage Company garage. It is the kind of place you would walk past and never notice. Just another regular business building in a city filled with them. But on this morning, this ordinary garage will become the place of the most famous gangland murder in American history. Inside, 7 men are waiting. They are expecting a delivery of stolen whiskey. It is a deal that seems too good to pass up. It is the kind of score that keeps a bootlegging business full of product and money. They stand around, some are smoking, some are making small talk. Their breath shows in the cold garage air. They have no idea that they only have minutes left to live. Just a few blocks away, George Bugs Moran is running behind schedule. He is supposed to be at that garage. He is supposed to be with his men for this whiskey deal. But fate, luck, or maybe just bad timing means he is still making his way through the snowy streets. He does not know it yet, but being late will save his life and ruin everything he has spent 15 years building. A Cadillac pulls up to the garage. It is made to look like a police car. Men wearing police uniforms step out and go inside the garage. The 7 men inside probably exchange looks that show they understand. A raid. They have dealt with raids before. Most police officers in Chicago are on someone's payroll. This will cost some money, maybe some product, but it is just part of doing business. The men in uniforms enter. They order the 7 men to stand in a line facing the brick wall. Hands up. This is normal procedure for a raid. The men do as they are told. They are not worried. Not yet. Then the Thompson submachine guns come out. The sound of gunfire in that small, closed space is loud enough to hurt your ears. About 70 rounds, maybe more, tear through skin and bone. The brick wall behind the men becomes covered with blood. Empty shell casings fall like rain onto the concrete floor. The whole thing takes maybe 1 minute, maybe less. When the shooting stops, 6 men are dead or dying. The 7th man, Frank Gusenberg, has been hit 14 times. But somehow, he is still alive. He will not talk. He will not tell the police who did this, even as he lies there dying. The code of the street is stronger than the bullets in his body. Moran arrives a short time later. He sees the police cars outside and keeps walking. When he learns what happened, when he sees the bodies and counts his dead men, he says the words that will be remembered forever. Only Capone kills like that. He was late, and being late saved his life, but destroyed everything he had built. This is the story of the man who lived through Al Capone's most brutal attack, only to lose everything anyway. This is the story of Bugs Moran, the last man left standing. Before we go deep into one of the most interesting gangster stories you have probably never fully heard, let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment down below. If you are getting comfortable for this long story, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss these deep dive stories. Give this video a like if you are ready for a trip into the Chicago underworld, from the top of a bootlegging empire to a lowly prison cell. Now let us go back to the start, before the massacre, before the empire, before Bugs Moran became a name people whispered in fear. On August 21st, 1893, in St. Paul, Minnesota, a baby boy is born who will one day rule Chicago's north side with a strong hand. His parents name him Adalard Kunin. It is not a name that makes people scared. It is not a name that gets respect in the harsh world of organized crime. But his parents do not know what their son will become. The Cunin family comes from French-Canadian roots. They are part of the big wave of immigrants who came to America looking for something better than what they left behind. Adelard's father works hard, the kind of honest work that puts food on the table, but never quite leads to wealth. They are not exactly poor, but they are not comfortable either. They live in that uncertain space where one disaster, an injury, an illness, a lost job, could send them falling into poverty, street. Paul in the 1890s is a city that is changing. The old frontier days are becoming just a memory, but the city has not yet become fully civilized. It is a place where the old rules are fading away and new ones have not quite taken hold. For a boy like Adelard Cunin, it is the perfect setting to learn that rules are flexible things. They are meant to be bent or broken by people who are smart enough and bold enough to do it. Young Adelard does not take to honest work the way his father hopes he will. School does not interest him much. The structured, disciplined world of regular jobs seems like a trap, a promise of the same simple life his parents have. He watches the men in the neighborhood who have money, who get respect, who answer to no one, and he learns an important lesson. Crime pays if you are good at it. His first crimes are small, not very important. He is a teenager when he starts stealing whatever he can get his hands on. Little items from stores, money from pockets, anything that can be turned into cash. He is not very good at it at first. He gets caught. He spends time in juvenile detention. He learns the hard way that being a criminal takes more than just being bold. But here is the thing about juvenile detention in the early 1900s. It is less like a place to fix young criminals and more like a college for crime. Young offenders do not get reformed. They get educated. They meet other young criminals, share tricks of the trade, and make connections. Adelard Cunin goes into detention as a clumsy teenage thief. He comes out with skills, contacts, and a tougher attitude. The story of how he got his nickname, Bugs, is not clear, like these things often are. Some say it comes from his wild, unpredictable behavior, Bugs being a word for crazy. Others say it is because his fast talking and nervous energy reminded people of Bugs crawling. The man himself never clears up the question. And maybe that is fitting. Bugs Moran will become many things in his life, but predictable is not one of them. By his late teenage years, Moran has moved on to more serious crimes. He gets involved in stealing horses. That is a crime that seems silly now, but it is serious business in the early 1900s. Horses are valuable property. They are needed for getting around and for work. Stealing them is a felony that can land you in real prison. Not just juvenile detention. Moran gets caught, of course. He is still young, still learning the trade. He does his time, gets out, commits more crimes, goes back to prison. It is a cycle that seems like it will keep going until he ends up locked away forever or dead. But then something changes. He figures out that St. Paul, Minnesota, is not big enough for his dreams. Chicago is calling him Chicago, where Prohibition is about to turn organized crime from a small-time activity into a huge business. Chicago, where a smart, tough man can build an empire. Chicago, where Bugs Moran will find his destiny. The Chicago that Bugs Moran walks into in the late 1910s is a city full of opposites. It is the second city, bursting with growth and big dreams. A place where meat packers and steel mills have made huge money for a few people and hard poverty for many others. It is fancy and rough at the same time, sophisticated and savage. A city where high culture and low violence exist right next to each other. The city's layout is a mix of different ethnic neighborhoods. Each one is like its own small world. The Irish control certain areas. The Italians control others. There are Polish neighborhoods, Jewish neighborhoods, German neighborhoods. These are not just cultural differences. They are the base of political and criminal power. To understand Chicago crime, you have to understand Chicago neighborhoods. The North Side, where Moran will eventually be in charge, is mostly Irish and German. It is an area of breweries and small shops, of working-class respectability mixed with underworld connections. The people here are not rich, but many are making a decent living. They work hard, go to church, raise families. They also drink, gamble, and go to prostitutes. They are human. In other words, with all the mixed feelings that come with that, when Moran arrives, organized crime in Chicago is already well established, but it is still fairly small in scale. Protection rackets, gambling operations, prostitution rings. These are the main businesses of the underworld. They make money, but there are limits. You can only shake down so many businesses, run so many card games, manage so many brothels. The market is only so big, but change is coming. The 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which bans the making, selling, and moving of alcoholic drinks, will be approved in January 1919. It will take effect 1 year later, in January 1920, and when it does, it will change organized crime from a profitable side business into a multi-million-dollar industry. The people pushing for prohibition mean well. For the most part, they see alcohol as a bad thing for society, something responsible for broken families, domestic violence, poverty, and moral decay. They believe that banning alcohol will create a better, more moral America. They are about to learn one of history's hard lessons. You cannot make people be moral by passing laws. And trying to do so creates chances for criminals that they could never create for themselves. Moran arrives in Chicago at exactly the perfect time. He is young, ambitious, and without mercy. He is also smart enough to see an opportunity when it comes along. But he needs something he does not have yet. Connections. He needs to meet the right people. Get in with the right group. He needs a teacher. He finds one in Dion O'Banion. Dean Charles O'Banion, known to everyone as Dion, is already a big figure in North Side crime. When Moran meets him, he is an interesting character, full of contradictions that perfectly capture the strangeness of Chicago in this time. O'Banion is a devoted Catholic who goes to Mass regularly. He is also a cold-blooded killer who has personally murdered many men. He runs Schofield's flower shop at 738 North State Street, and he actually works there, arranging flowers with real skill and care. He is loved in the North Side neighborhood, known for being generous and charming. He is also one of the most feared men in Chicago, someone you cross at your own great risk. O'Banion's his flower shop is perfectly located, right across from Holy Name Cathedral. This is not an accident. O'Banion chose this spot on purpose. He provides flowers for weddings, funerals, and church ceremonies. Many of his customers are the same people whose businesses he is shaking down, or whose illegal activities he is controlling. They pay him for protection and for flowers. And they do both with a smile, because that is just how things work. When Moran meets O'Banion, he is impressed right away. Here is a man who has figured out how to be both respectable and criminal. Someone who gets real affection, even as he carries out brutal violence. It is a balancing act that Moran will never quite master, but watching O'Banion gives him a pattern to follow. O'Banion sees something in Moran, too. The young man is rough around the edges, quick-tempered and acting without thinking. But he is not afraid, and he is loyal. Those qualities matter in the underworld. Intelligence can be developed, plans can be taught, but courage and loyalty come from within. You either have them or you do not. Moran joins O'Banion's group and starts learning the business. It is not just about muscle, although muscle matters. It is about understanding territories, respecting boundaries, knowing when to talk things out and when to fight. It is about managing relationships with cops and politicians, who are just as much a part of the criminal world as the gangsters themselves. The North Side Gang, as it becomes known, is fairly advanced for its time. O'Banion does not just run random criminal activities. He organizes them, coordinates them, makes sure they work together well. It is a business, and he runs it like one, even if the products are illegal and arguments are settled with bullets instead of lawsuits. Moran proves himself quickly. He is willing to do the dirty work that others avoid. He is good in a fight, not afraid when bullets start flying. He is also smart enough to understand the bigger picture, to see how individual actions fit into the overall plan. O'Banion notices this and starts giving Moran more responsibility. But there is a problem on the horizon, one that will eventually lead to all the violence and bloodshed to come. The North Side Gang is not the only organization in Chicago. On the South Side, the Italian groups are growing in power and ambition. They are led by men like Johnny Torrio and his protégé, a young, ambitious gangster named Al Capone. The Italians look at Chicago and see a city that should be brought together under one leader, their leadership. They see the various independent gangs controlling their small territories and see inefficiency, wasted opportunity. They believe that bringing everything together would help everyone, by which they mean it would help them. O'Banion and the North Side Gang see things differently. They have built their empire. They control their territory, and they have no interest in becoming less important than anyone else. The North Side is theirs, and they plan to keep it that way. These different ideas will eventually lead to war. But first, Prohibition has to arrive and change what is at stake from important to huge. When the 18th Amendment takes effect at midnight on January 17, 1920, America becomes officially dry. The making, selling, and moving of strong drinks are now illegal everywhere in the United States. It is a big experiment in changing society, an attempt to create a more moral nation by using laws. It is also the greatest gift ever given to organized crime. Americans do not stop drinking when Prohibition starts. They just start drinking illegally, and someone has to provide that illegal alcohol. Enter the bootleggers, the rum runners, the people running speakeasies. Enter men like Dion O'Banion and Bugs Moran. The money involved is incredibly attractive. Alcohol that cost pennies to make before Prohibition now sells for dollars. A bottle of whiskey that might have sold for $1 in 1919 can now sell for $5 or $10 in 1920. Beer that breweries once sold for a few cents a bottle now gets top prices. The profit margins are huge, and the market is basically unlimited. Everyone drinks, rich and poor, men and women, young and old. The North Side Gang moves quickly to take control of bootlegging in their area. They have several advantages. They already have relationships with breweries. They have connections with Canadian suppliers. And they have a way to distribute products built through years of running other illegal businesses. They also have something just as valuable: political connections. Chicago politics in the 1920s is incredibly corrupt, even for the standards of American city politics. Aldermen, police captains, judges, all of them can be bought. The North Side Gang has built these relationships carefully, and now they pay off. Police raids happen, but they are carefully planned in advance. The gang gets warning ahead of time, removes most of the product, leaves just enough behind to make the raid look real. Arrests happen, but they are mostly for show. Cases get thrown out, evidence disappears, witnesses forget what they saw. Moran does well in this new environment. He is put in charge of several speakeasies. He is responsible for making sure they stay stocked, protected, and profitable. He is good at it. He combines business sense with the willingness to use violence when needed. A speakeasy owner who tries to buy from someone else gets a visit from Moran and his guys. The message is delivered clearly: buy from us or face the consequences. The money starts flowing in unbelievable amounts. The North Side Gang is pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, maybe more. O'Banion, Moran, and the other key members are becoming wealthy beyond anything they had imagined. They buy fancy cars, expensive clothes, fancy apartments. They eat in the best restaurants, tip generously, live like kings. But the Italian groups on the South Side are making even more money. Johnny Torrio and Al Capone are building an empire that is much bigger than what the North Side Gang has done. They control more territory, have more speakeasies, run more breweries. They are also more organized, running their operations with business-like efficiency. Torrio looks at the map of Chicago and sees waste. All these different gangs controlling separate territories, competing for business, driving up costs through their conflicts. He suggests a solution. Divide the city into zones with each gang controlling its area and staying out of the others. No more competition. No more conflict. Just organized, profitable business. O'Banion listens to this idea and laughs in Torrio's face. The North Side Gang has not built its empire just to accept random boundaries set by the Italians. They do not recognize Torrio's right to divide up the city. If they want to expand their operations into other areas, they will. If someone does not like it, well, that is what guns are for. This rejection plants the seeds of the conflict that will eventually destroy them all. Torrio is patient, but he is also proud. He does not forget insults, and he does not forgive challenges to his authority. O'Banion has just made a powerful enemy. For Moran, these are exciting days. He is in his late 20s, wealthy, powerful, feared, and respected. He has a reputation as a tough guy, someone you do not mess with. He is also getting a reputation for being unpredictable. For sudden violence, the nickname Bugs seems more fitting than ever. His temper becomes famous. He might be joking one moment and pulling out a gun the next. He takes insults, whether real or just imagined, very personally, more than once. O'Banion has to step in to stop Moran from starting fights that would be bad for business. But Moran is also fiercely loyal, which O'Banion values. In a world of changing friendships and routine betrayals, loyalty is a rare thing. Moran would die for O'Banion, would kill for him without hesitation. That kind of devotion is worth more than gold in the underworld. The North Side Gang's operations grow throughout the early 1920s. They do not just run speakeasies, they control breweries, both the legal ones they have taken over and the illegal ones they run directly. They have connections with Canadian suppliers who sneak quality whiskey across the border. They have spread out their investments, in modern business terms, making sure they have different ways to make money. Moran is right in the middle of it all, managing operations, collecting payments, keeping discipline. He is O'Banion's right-hand man. Trusted with important responsibility, he is also making enemies. Because you cannot rise in the underworld without stepping on people along the way. The conflicts with the South Side Italians get worse. There are arguments over territory, over suppliers, over speakeasy operations. Sometimes these arguments are settled by talking. More often, they are settled by violence. Men disappear, bodies turn up in alleys or rivers, and everyone knows what happened. Even if nothing can be proven, the cycle of revenge begins. The North Side hits one of Capone's operations. The South Side hits back by hitting one of O'Banion's. Back and forth it goes, an eye for an eye, each side trying to hurt the other without starting an all-out war. It is a dangerous game, and everyone knows that sooner or later someone is going to go too far. But for now, in the early 1920s, there is still some kind of order. The different gangs keep their territories, accept certain boundaries, avoid the kind of open fighting that would bring too much attention from the authorities. It is a careful balance kept more by self-interest than any sense of honor. That balance is about to be broken. It is mid-afternoon on November 10th, 1924, and Diane O'Banion is in his flower shop doing what he loves. Working with flowers, he is putting together arrangements for several funerals, including one for Mike Merlo, president of the Union Siciliana, who has just died. O'Banion takes pride in his work. The flowers are beautiful, carefully arranged, perfect. 3 men enter the shop: John Scalise, Albert Anselmi, and Frankie Yale. They are from out of town, brought in specifically for this job. O'Banion knows Frankie Yale, has done business with him. When Yale holds out his hand in greeting, O'Banion takes it without suspicion. Yale grips O'Banion's hand tightly. Holding him in place, Scalise and Anselmi pull out guns. O'Banion realizes what is happening but cannot break free. They shoot him 6 times, 2 shots to the chest, 2 to the throat, 2 to the face. It is brutal, efficient, and very personal. The shots to the face are a message. This is about disrespect, about insult, about someone thinking they are above everyone else. O'Banion falls among his flowers, his blood mixing with water from the vases, his life ending in the shop he loved. The killers walk out calmly, get in their car, and drive away. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. Nobody knows anything. That is how these things go in Chicago. When Moran gets the news, he is destroyed. O'Banion was not just his boss. He was his teacher, his friend, the man who gave him his chance, and now he is dead, murdered by the Italians in what is clearly a planned attack. The message is clear. The South Side has decided that O'Banion is more trouble than he is worth, and they have removed the problem. The funeral is amazing. One of the most fancy Chicago has ever seen. Thousands of dollars worth of flowers. Ironic for a man who sold flowers. 26 cars and trucks to carry all the flower arrangements. A bronze casket that costs $10,000. 10,000 people attending the services. It is a show of respect, but also a show of power. The North Side gang is saying, you can kill our leader, but you cannot make us smaller. The question now is who takes over. O'Banion's death creates an empty space at the top, and nature does not like empty spaces. Several men might claim leadership. Vincent the Schemer Drucci, Jaime Weiss, George Bugs Moran. They are all senior members of the gang, all capable, all respected. Jaime Weiss becomes the new leader. But it is not a one-man show. Weiss is first among equals, the public face of the organization, but major decisions are made together. Moran becomes Weiss's right-hand man, just as he was for O'Banion. He is heavily involved in all important operations and decisions. What everyone agrees on is the desire for revenge. Everyone in the North Side gang wants blood for O'Banion's death. They know who ordered the hit: Johnny Torrio, Al Capone, or both. They know who carried it out: Skull Eyes, Anselmi, and Yale. Now they need to respond to show that killing a North Side leader has consequences. The war begins in earnest. The murder of Dion O'Banion changes the Chicago underworld from a competitive business environment into a war zone. The careful balance that had kept relative peace breaks completely. Now it is kill or be killed, strike before being struck. Get rid of your enemies before they get rid of you. Jaime Weiss is not interested in talking or compromise. He wants revenge, pure and simple. He wants Johnny Torrio and Al Capone dead. And he is willing to risk everything to make it happen. On January 12, 1925, less than 2 months after O'Banion's death, Weiss makes his move. Torrio is coming home from a shopping trip with his wife. As they pull up to their apartment building at 711 South Clyde Avenue, a car speeds up behind them. Gunmen open fire with shotguns and handguns, hitting Torrio many times. Torrio falls, seriously wounded. One of the gunmen, identified by witnesses as Bugs Moran, walks up to the fallen mob boss and points his gun at Torrio's head for the final shot. He pulls the trigger, click, empty. The gun is out of bullets before Moran can reload. The police sirens are getting closer. The hit team runs away. Torrio survives, barely. He is hit in the jaw, chest, groin, and legs. He spends weeks in the hospital recovering. And when he is finally released, he makes a decision that surprises everyone. He is done. He is getting out of the business entirely. Leaving Chicago, retiring to Italy, he hands his whole operation over to Al Capone. It is not clear whether Torrio retires because he is afraid of another attempt on his life, or because he is smart enough to see where all this violence is heading. Either way, his leaving removes one of the more steadying influences from the Chicago underworld. Torrio, for all his faults, believed in organization and order. Capone is more ambitious, more aggressive, and more willing to use extreme violence to reach his goals. For Moran, the failed hit on Torrio is frustrating, but not a disaster. They came close, very close, to killing the head of the South Side operation. If that gun had not been empty, if there had been one more second before the police arrived, everything might have been different. But in the criminal world, close does not count. Torrio lives, hands over power to Capone. And the North Side gang situation actually gets worse. The violence gets worse throughout 1925. Drive-by shootings become common. Bombings target speakeasies, breweries, and homes. Men are found dead in alleys, in cars, in rivers. The number of bodies grows week by week. The Chicago police, many of them on the payroll of one gang or another, make weak efforts to stop the killing, but mostly just try to avoid getting caught in the middle. Moran is right in the middle of the fighting. He personally takes part in many assassination attempts, shootouts, and bombings. He is not afraid to the point of being careless, always willing to take on dangerous jobs. His reputation grows. He is a cold-blooded killer, someone who does not hesitate, does not show mercy, does not back down. But he is also showing signs of instability that worry even his friends. His temper is explosive, his judgment sometimes questionable. He makes decisions based on emotion instead of strategy, going after personal enemies when he should be focusing on business. Jaime Weiss manages to keep Moran pointed in useful directions, but it takes constant attention. The war is not just fought with bullets and guns. Fighting over money matters too. Each side tries to damage the other's business operations. Speakeasies are raided and destroyed. Shipments of alcohol are hijacked. Breweries are sabotaged. It is not enough to kill your enemy's soldiers. You have to choke off their money, make it impossible for them to keep their operations going. The North Side Gang holds its own during this time. They have capable leadership in Jaime Weiss, solid operations and fighters like Moran, who are willing to go toe-to-toe with anyone, but they are also outnumbered and increasingly outgunned. Capone's organization is larger, richer, and more efficiently organized. It is a war of wearing down the enemy, and wearing down favors the bigger army. In September 1926, the North Side Gang makes another attempt on Capone's life. They send a line of cars past the Hawthorne Hotel in Cicero, where Capone has his headquarters. The cars are filled with gunmen carrying Thompson submachine guns. They open fire on the hotel, shooting more than 1,000 rounds into the building in what becomes known as the Hawthorne Hotel shooting. Somehow, amazingly, Capone is not hit. He is inside the hotel when the shooting starts, and he hits the floor immediately. By the time he comes out, the attackers are long gone. The hotel is full of bullet holes. Windows are broken. Furniture is destroyed. But Capone is not hurt. The attack makes him furious. It is one thing to go after him when he is driving around town. It is another to attack his headquarters. To show such obvious disrespect, Capone makes a decision. Jaime Weiss has to die. It is mid-afternoon on October 11th, 1926, and Jaime Weiss is walking toward his headquarters on North State Street, above Dion O'Banion's old flower shop. He is with several associates including Sam Peller and Patrick Murray. They have just come from a court appearance, and they are heading back to the office to continue the day's business. They do not notice the men watching from the second-floor window of a rooming house across the street. They do not see the guns pointing at them. They are relaxed, not expecting danger in broad daylight on a busy street. The shooters open fire with submachine guns and shotguns. The sound is deafening, echoes bouncing off the buildings. Weiss is hit many times and falls immediately. The others scatter, trying to find cover, but the shooters have a clear line of fire. When the shooting finally stops, Weiss is dead. Patrick Murray is dying, and several others are hurt. The police count over 35 bullet holes in Weiss's body. It is a brutal killing, even by Chicago standards. Holy Name Cathedral across the street has bullet holes in its cornerstone. They can still be seen today, kept as an unintentional reminder of Chicago's violent past. For Bugs Moran, Weiss's death is another terrible blow. In less than 2 years, he has lost both of his teachers, both the men who shaped him and gave him chances. First O'Banion, now Weiss. The North Side Gang's leaders keep getting killed, and each time the organization becomes a little less stable, a little less feared, a little more open to attack. But Weiss's death also represents an opportunity for Moran. With both O'Banion and Weiss gone, there is no clear person to take over. Vincent Drucci is the other senior member, but he is unpredictable even by the standards of Bugs Moran. The other gang members look to Moran for leadership, and he steps up to take it. Bugs Moran, at 33 years old, becomes the boss of the North Side Gang. It is the peak of everything he has worked for since coming to Chicago. He has gone from a small-time criminal to the head of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in America. He controls speakeasies, breweries, gambling operations, and prostitution rings across the North Side. He has soldiers willing to kill and die on his command. He has police and politicians in his pocket. He is wealthy, powerful, and feared. He has also inherited an organization at war, outnumbered by a larger, richer, more organized enemy. Al Capone's Chicago outfit has survived every attempt to kill its leadership. Meanwhile, the North Side gang has lost 2 bosses in 2 years. The direction things are going is not hopeful. Moran's first priority is to make his control stronger. Some gang members might question whether he is the right choice for leadership. His temper is well known. His acting without thinking is a matter of fact. Can he provide the steady leadership the gang needs? Can he make strategic decisions instead of just quick ones? Moran deals with these worries through a mix of quick action and talking with key gang members. He does not try to be a dictator. He knows that will not work with the North Side gang's culture. Instead, he presents himself as first among equals, the leader who will listen to advice, but will ultimately make the hard decisions. He also makes it clear that the war with Capone will continue. There will be no surrender, no compromise, no acceptance of Capone's control. The North Side is their territory, and they will defend it to the death if necessary. Vincent Drucci is still around, still a major figure in the gang, but he is increasingly unstable. On April 4th, 1927, the problem solves itself when Drucci is killed by police detective Dan Healy during an argument. The official story is that Drucci attacked Healy, forcing the detective to shoot him in self-defense. The unofficial story is that Healy murdered Drucci, maybe on someone's orders. Either way, Drucci's death leaves Moran as the clear leader of the North Side gang. There is no one left to challenge his authority. No other senior member with similar standing. The gang is his, for better or worse, under Moran's leadership. The North Side gang continues to be a major force in Chicago's underworld. They are not as large as Capone's organization, not as wealthy, not as well organized, but they are tough, they are experienced, and they control valuable territory. The North Side of Chicago is mostly Irish and German, working-class neighborhoods with strong community ties. The people here have known the North Side gang for years. They have grown up with these guys, gone to school with them, worshipped at the same churches. There is a level of community support that Capone's organization, seen as outside invaders, can never quite achieve in this territory. Moran runs a varied criminal empire. The main business is still alcohol. Speakeasies, breweries, smuggling operations. But there is also gambling, prostitution, labor racketeering, and various protection schemes. Every illegal activity that makes money gets considered. The speakeasies are especially profitable. These are not just rough bars. Many are fancy places that serve middle and upper class customers. They have good liquor, decent food, live entertainment. The best ones are almost impossible to tell apart from legal nightclubs, except for the fact that they are selling illegal alcohol. Moran makes sure his speakeasies are well stocked with quality product. Some of it comes from Canada, smuggled whiskey that is the real deal, aged properly with legal labels. This Canadian whiskey is expensive, but it gets top prices. Rich customers are willing to pay extra for authentic Scotch or Canadian rye instead of the cheap homemade liquor that many bootleggers sell. The North Side gang also runs several breweries, making beer for the speakeasies and private customers. Beer is bulkier and harder to move than liquor, which makes making it locally necessary. These breweries operate in a gray area. Some are legal businesses that accidentally produce more than their permits allow. Others are completely illegal operations hidden in warehouses and industrial buildings. Moran's way of managing is hands-on. He visits the speakeasies regularly, checks on operations, talks to managers and bartenders. He wants to know what is selling, what customers are asking for, what competitors are doing. He is not happy to sit in an office and write reports. He wants to see things for himself. This approach has good points and bad points. On the plus side, Moran stays closely connected to his business, spots problems early, and keeps personal relationships with key employees. On the minus side, he sometimes gets too involved in details that should be given to others. And his temper means these personal visits can turn ugly if he does not like what he sees. His personality is complex, full of contradictions. He can be charming and generous, buying drinks for everyone in a speakeasy, tipping generously, telling jokes and stories. He is loyal to his people, takes care of families when soldiers get killed or sent to prison, remembers birthdays and anniversaries. These qualities inspire real affection and loyalty from his organization. But he can also be terrifying. His temper is explosive and unpredictable. A small insult can send him into a rage that ends with someone badly beaten or worse. He is suspicious of betrayal, constantly worried that someone is trying to cheat him or weaken his authority. This suspicion is not completely unfair. In the criminal world, betrayal is common, but it makes him difficult to work for and sometimes clouds his judgment. Financially, Moran does well during his time as boss. The exact numbers are impossible to know. Criminal organizations do not file tax returns, but estimates suggest the North Side gang is making hundreds of thousands of dollars per month in money coming in. After expenses and payments to police and politicians, Moran's personal share is big. He is a millionaire by the standards of the 1920s, which would be tens of millions in today's money. He lives well, though not as flashy as Capone. He has a nice apartment, drives expensive cars, wears tailored suits. He eats in good restaurants, vacations in popular places, enjoys the finer things in life, but he is not showy about it. Part of this is his personality. Moran is not the type to show off. Part of it is strategy. Showing off wealth attracts attention from law enforcement and rival gangsters. His personal life during this time is complicated. He is married to Lucille Logan Bielek. Though the relationship is troubled, criminal life is not good for stable marriages. And Moran's personality makes him a difficult husband. There are separations and getting back together, arguments and apologies. It is a pattern that will continue throughout his life. Despite personal problems, Moran keeps his focus on business. The war with Capone continues throughout 1927 and 1928. Though it is more of a Cold War than the hot conflict of earlier years, there are still shootings and bombings. Still bodies turning up, but the intensity has lessened. Both sides have learned that all-out war is expensive and brings too much attention from law enforcement. But the peace is fragile, kept by both sides being tired rather than true agreement. Both sides continue to look for chances to hit their enemies hard. Both sides know that sooner or later the conflict will start again. For Moran, the challenge is keeping his organization strong while Capone grows larger and richer. It is like being in a race where your opponent has a head start and longer legs. You can run as hard as you want, but you are still losing ground. Moran needs something to change the situation, to give his organization an advantage. He never gets that advantage. Instead, Capone delivers a blow that will destroy everything Moran has built. To understand what happens to Bugs Moran, you need to understand Al Capone. These two men are locked in a fight to the death that will define both their reputations. And Capone is the bigger, stronger opponent. Alphonse Gabriel Capone arrives in Chicago in 1919, brought in by Johnny Torrio to help manage operations. He is young, only 20 when he arrives, but he is already experienced in criminal work. He has worked for the 5 Points gang in New York, learned the business from some of the toughest operators in the country. Capone is smart, without mercy, and ambitious. He understands that criminal organizations need to be run like businesses, with proper accounting, strategic planning, and professional management. Under his leadership, the Chicago outfit becomes the most advanced criminal enterprise in America. By the time Capone takes over from Torrio in 1925, he has already changed the organization. He has expanded territories, improved operations, increased money coming in. He has also built a public image as a businessman and person who gives to charity, portraying himself as someone providing a service that people want. He opens soup kitchens during the Depression, gives to charities, presents himself as a man of the people. The reality, of course, is that Capone is a brutal killer who has personally murdered many people and ordered the deaths of many more. He is a criminal who has corrupted whole police departments and political machines. But he is good at managing his image, and many people, especially those not directly affected by his violence, see him as a romantic figure, a modern-day Robin Hood. Capone looks at Chicago and sees inefficiency. All these different gangs controlling separate territories, competing for business, wasting resources on conflict. He believes bringing everything together would help everyone. Lower costs, higher profits, less violence attracting law enforcement attention. Of course, bringing everything together under his control, with other gangs becoming less important than the outfit. Most gangs eventually accept this arrangement. It is simply not worth fighting Capone's stronger forces. They negotiate deals, accept boundaries, pay tribute, and keep operating within their smaller areas. It is not perfect, but it beats being dead. Bugs Moran and the North Side Gang refuse to accept this arrangement. For Moran, it is partly about principle. The North Side Gang has operated on its own for years, built its empire through hard work and even harder violence. Why should they now accept being less important? Why should they pay tribute to Capone? They built their organization, they control their territory, and they are not giving it up without a fight. It is also personal. Moran blames Capone for O'Banion's death, for Weiss's death, for the deaths of dozens of North Side soldiers. These are not just business competitors. They are enemies in the truest sense. There is too much blood between them for any agreement. From Capone's view, Moran is an annoying obstacle to his vision of a united Chicago underworld. The North Side Gang is not strong enough to seriously threaten the outfit, but they are strong enough to be a constant annoyance. They reject Capone's authority. They keep operating on their own, and they occasionally hit outfit operations. They are a problem that needs to be solved. By late 1928, Capone has decided on a solution. Get rid of the North Side Gang's leadership in one hard strike. Kill Moran and his top people. Cut off the head of the organization. And the remaining members will either fall in line or be easily taken over or killed. It is not a new strategy. Capone has used it before, most notably with the murders of O'Banion and Weiss. But this time, he wants to be thorough. He does not want to kill just the boss. He wants to kill the whole leadership group in one single operation. That way, there is no one left to get revenge. No one to bring together the remaining members. No one to keep up the resistance. Capone begins planning what will become the most famous gangland killing in American history. Before we get to the massacre itself, it is important to understand what is at stake here. This is not just about ego or revenge. Though those things matter, this is about money. Huge amounts of money. By 1929, bootlegging in Chicago is a multi-million-dollar industry. The exact numbers are impossible to know, but estimates suggest the various criminal organizations together are making tens of millions of dollars per year in money coming in. That is money coming in, not profit. But even after expenses, the profit margins are big. The Chicago outfit under Capone's leadership is probably making $5 to $10 million per year in profit. That is equal to hundreds of millions of dollars in today's money. It is enough money to buy police departments, political machines, and court systems. It is enough money to hire armies of enforcers, run many businesses, and live like kings. The North Side Gang is not operating at that level, but they are still very profitable. Estimates suggest they are making maybe $1 to $2 million per year in profit. That is enough to keep a big organization going, pay soldiers, bribe officials, and make sure Moran and his top men live very comfortably. But the market is only so big. There are only so many people in Chicago. Only so much alcohol they can drink. Every dollar the North Side Gang makes is a dollar Capone does not make. Every speakeasy Moran controls is one the outfit does not control. Every brewery the North Side runs is one less for Capone's organization. From Capone's view, getting rid of the North Side Gang would accomplish several goals at the same time. It would remove competitors, allowing the outfit to take over their operations and customers. It would show other gangs what happens when they resist outfit authority. It would get rid of a constant source of violence and conflict, reducing law enforcement attention, and it would satisfy Capone's desire for revenge against the men who have tried to kill him many times. For Moran, what is at stake is his very existence. He is not just fighting to keep his share of the market. He is fighting to survive. If Capone succeeds in getting rid of the North Side Gang, Moran will be lucky to escape with his life. More likely, he will end up dead or in prison or forced to leave Chicago. Everything he has built, everything he has fought for, will be gone. The violence gets worse throughout 1928. The North Side Gang hijacks several of Capone's alcohol shipments, taking away the outfit's product and money. Capone's men strike back by bombing North Side speakeasies and breweries. Back and forth it goes, tit for tat, each side trying to hurt the other. But Capone is winning the bigger war. The outfit's operations are larger and more varied. They can take losses that would destroy the North Side Gang. They have more soldiers, more resources, more political connections. Time is on Capone's side, and both he and Moran know it. Moran needs something to change the situation. He needs a big win, a major blow to Capone's operations. Something to show that the North Side Gang is still a force to be respected. He needs to prove to his own people, to Capone's organization, and to the other gangs watching the conflict that the North Side is not finished yet. This desperation, this need for a victory, makes him open to attack. And Capone knows exactly how to use that weakness. One of the things making the conflict more complicated is the involvement of the Aiello brothers. The Aiellos are Sicilian gangsters who control significant operations on Chicago's west side. They are also in conflict with Capone over control of the Union Siciliana, a powerful group that Capone wants to control. Joseph Aiello, the leader of the Aiello clan, hates Capone with a passion that matches Moran's. He has tried to kill Capone many times, including a bold attempt to bribe Capone's personal chef to poison him. The chef took the bribe and immediately told Capone, which led to several Aiello associates being killed. But Joseph Aiello keeps trying, seeing Capone's removal as necessary for his own survival. Moran and Aiello form an alliance against their common enemy. It is an alliance of convenience rather than true friendship. They are both practical criminals who recognize the value of working together against a stronger opponent. They coordinate operations, share information, and sometimes do joint attacks on outfit targets. But this alliance also makes them easy to predict. Capone knows that Moran and Aiello are working together, which means he can use one to trap the other. If he can create a situation where Moran thinks he is getting help from the Aiellos, or the other way around, he can trick them into an ambush. This understanding is part of Capone's planning for what is to come. He knows Moran is looking for chances to strike back at the outfit. He knows Moran needs product, alcohol to stock his speakeasies and supply his customers. If Capone could offer what looks like a perfect opportunity, high-quality alcohol at a good price, Moran might take the bait. The trap is being set. Though Moran does not know it yet, Capone is in Florida when the final planning for the massacre takes place. This is on purpose. He wants to be far away from Chicago when it happens, to have an alibi that cannot be broken. He has learned from past experience that being directly connected to famous killings brings unwanted attention. Better to be clearly somewhere else, enjoying the Florida sunshine when the violence occurs. The planning is handled by trusted top men, most likely Jack McGurn, who has a personal desire for revenge against the North Side Gang. McGurn's stepfather was killed during a robbery, and McGurn blames the North Side Gang for it. He is also a skilled planner, capable of organizing a complex operation. The plan is simple in idea, but requires careful carrying out. They need to trick Moran and his top people into coming to one place at a specific time. Then they need to kill them all quickly and well before any can escape or fight back. Finally, they need to get away cleanly, leaving no evidence that can connect the killings to Capone or the outfit. To do this, they create a situation that Moran will not be able to resist. A shipment of high-quality whiskey at a below-market price. The whiskey is supposedly hijacked from a Detroit operation, which explains the good price. The deal will happen at the SMC Cartage Company garage at 2122 North Clark Street, a place the North Side Gang sometimes uses for storing and moving alcohol. The bait is offered through middlemen, people who have contacts with the North Side Gang, but are not directly connected to Capone. These middlemen tell Moran's people about this opportunity, stressing that it is time-sensitive. The whiskey needs to be moved quickly before anyone notices it is missing. Moran takes the bait. He agrees to meet at the garage on the morning of February 14, 1929, to check the whiskey and complete the deal. He tells his top people to be there as well. This is exactly what Capone's people want. All the key leaders in one place at one time. The hit team is put together carefully. They need men who are reliable, experienced, and willing to commit mass murder. Some are outfit numbers. Others are probably hired guns brought in from out of town. They are given Thompson submachine guns, Tommy guns, weapons that have become connected with gangster violence. The clever part of the plan is the fake police raid. The killers will dress as police officers, arrive in what looks like a police car, and enter the garage as if doing a raid. The North Side Gang members will assume it is just another routine shakedown, annoying but not dangerous. They will do what the police order, line up against the wall, assume they will be arrested or released after paying a bribe. And then the shooting will start. It is a cold-blooded plan. But Capone is not known for mercy. He wants Moran dead. He wants the North Side Gang destroyed. And he is willing to do whatever violence is necessary to reach those goals. Everything is set. The trap is laid. The killers are ready. The date is chosen. February 14th, 1929, Valentine's Day. A day that will become famous for a completely different kind of massacre. There is only one thing Capone's people do not plan for. Cannot plan for because it is the kind of random chance that cannot be predicted or controlled. Bugs Moran is going to be late. The temperature is around 18 degrees Fahrenheit, when the sun comes up over Chicago on Thursday, February 14th, 1929. Snow from earlier storms still covers much of the city, piled along streets and sidewalks, creating a winter scene that would be pretty if not for the bitter cold. At 2122 North Clark Street, the SMC Cartage Company garage looks like any other business building on the street. It is brick, plain, with big doors for vehicles to go in and out. Inside there is space for trucks, storage for goods, an office area. It is a legal business, though. Like many businesses in Prohibition-era Chicago, it also serves less legal purposes. 7 men gather in the garage that morning. Frank Gusenberg, age 36, one of Moran's top enforcers. He is tough, loyal, and experienced. His brother Peter is also in the gang, also a killer. Though Peter is not here this morning. Wait, Peter Gusenberg is actually here, despite what I just said. Both brothers are present. Peter is 33, just as tough and capable as his older brother. Together, they are 2 of Moran's most reliable soldiers. Albert Ketcholik, known as James Clark, age 44. He is Moran's second in command, a trusted top man involved in all major decisions. Adam Heyer, age 44, the gang's bookkeeper and business manager. He is less involved in violence, more focused on the money side of operations. He keeps the books, manages the money, makes sure everyone gets paid. Reinhard Schwimmer, age 29, an eye doctor who hangs around with the gang because he finds gangster life exciting. He is not actually a gangster himself. He has a legal business, but he likes the thrill of being around dangerous men. This interest is about to cost him his life. Albert Weinschenk, age 36, who manages several speakeasies for the gang. He looks like Moran physically, a fact that will lead to tragic results. John May, age 34, a mechanic who sometimes works for the gang, but is not really a member. He is here this morning to work on a truck. He has a wife and 7 children at home. He has brought his dog, a German shepherd named Highball, who is tied up in the garage. These 7 men are waiting for Moran and for the whiskey shipment. They are not especially worried or nervous. This is just business. The kind of transaction they have done dozens of times. Some smoke cigarettes. Some talk casually. Some just wait. The garage is cold. And they are probably looking forward to getting this deal done so they can go somewhere warmer. Outside in a nearby building, the killers are watching. They are waiting for Moran to arrive before they move in. The whole point is to get all the leaders together. But as the morning goes on and Moran does not show up, they have a decision to make. Wait longer and risk the men in the garage getting suspicious and leaving. Or move now and hope they can get Moran another time. Then they see someone who looks like Moran entering the garage. It is actually Albert Weinschenk, but from a distance. The similarity is close enough. The lookout signals the hit team. Moran is inside. It is time to move. At about 10:30 a.m., a Cadillac sedan made to look like a police car pulls up in front of the garage. 4 men get out, 2 dressed in police uniforms. 2 in regular clothes. They are carrying weapons, though they keep them mostly hidden as they approach the building. To anyone watching, it looks like a police raid. The kind of thing that happens regularly in Prohibition-era Chicago. Meanwhile, Bugs Moran is a few blocks away. Running late, he is with Willie Marks and Ted Newberry, 2 other gang members. They are heading to the garage for the meeting. But Moran has been delayed. Maybe he stopped to talk to someone. Maybe he had other business to take care of. Maybe he just slept late. Whatever the reason, he is not where he is supposed to be. As Moran and his companions get near the garage, they see the police car parked outside. Moran stops. He knows that if the cops are raiding the garage, the last thing he wants to do is walk in there. Even if the cops are on his payroll, and many are, it is better to avoid being caught in a raid. There will be paperwork, possible arrests, unnecessary complications. Let us take a walk. Moran says to his companions. They turn and go in another direction, planning to come back later when the police have left. This decision saves Moran's life. The 4 men enter the garage. The 7 men inside turn to look, probably expecting customers or associates. Instead, they see what looks like police officers. One of the uniformed men, we do not know which one, because no one survives to tell, orders the 7 men to line up against the north wall of the garage. Hands up. It is normal procedure for a raid. The gangsters do as they are told. Probably annoyed, but not alarmed. They have been through this before. Either these cops are on someone's payroll and will let them go after taking some money, or they will make a show of arresting everyone, and lawyers will sort it out later. The 7 men line up against the brick wall, hands raised, somewhere in the garage. Highball, the dog, barks, sensing the tension, even if his owner does not. Then the killers pull out their Thompson submachine guns. The realization of what is happening probably hits the 7 men in the instant before the shooting starts. This is not a police raid. These are not cops. This is an execution. The garage explodes with gunfire. The Thompson submachine gun is a devastating weapon, capable of firing 800 rounds per minute in a closed space like the garage. The sound is deafening, overwhelming, confusing. The killers spray the wall with bullets, moving their guns back and forth to make sure every target is hit. The 7 men fall, their bodies jerking as bullets tear through them. Blood sprays across the whitewashed brick wall. Empty shell casings clatter on the concrete floor. The whole thing probably takes less than a minute, possibly less than 30 seconds, when the shooting stops. The garage is filled with gun smoke and the smell of gunpowder. 6 of the 7 men are dead or dying. The 7th, Frank Gusenberg, is somehow still alive despite being hit 14 times. He is in unimaginable pain, his body destroyed, but he is awake. The killers check their work, walking among the bodies to make sure everyone is dead or dying. Then they stage the final part of their theatrical exit. The 2 men in regular clothes raise their hands as if being arrested. The 2 in police uniforms march them out of the garage at gunpoint. To anyone watching from the street, it looks like the cops have arrested 2 suspects. A Cadillac drives away. Inside the garage, Highball the dog howls and barks, tied up near his dying owner. The sound carries out to the street, an animal's distress at violence it cannot understand. A neighbor disturbed by the dog's continuous barking calls the police. Actual police this time, not killers in disguise. Officers arrive at the garage, expecting maybe a burglary or a small disturbance. They find a horror scene. 7 men are lying against the wall and on the floor in pools of blood. The brick wall is full of bullet holes and splattered with gore. Empty shell casings are everywhere. The smell of blood, gun smoke, and released bowels fills the air. It is a scene of such violence that even hardened Chicago cops are shocked. When one of the bodies moves, Frank Gusenberg is still alive. Though how is a mystery. He has been shot 14 times, 7 times in the face alone, but he is awake and trying to speak. The police call for ambulances. While they wait, they try to get information from Gusenberg. Who did this? Who shot you? Who is responsible? Gusenberg, following the code of the street to his last breath. refuses to help. "I am not going to talk," he says. Or according to some reports, when asked who shot him, he replies, "Nobody shot me." He dies several hours later at Alexian Brothers Hospital without giving police any useful information. The news of the massacre spreads quickly. Reporters rush to the scene. Photographers document the horror. Newsboys sell papers with screaming headlines. The Valentine's Day Massacre, as it immediately becomes known, is front-page news across America. The public reaction is one of shock and horror. Chicago has seen plenty of gangland killings, but nothing like this. The sheer brutality, the cold-blooded nature of lining men up and machine gunning them, it is beyond what most people can understand. This is not just criminal business. This is barbarism. When Bugs Moran learns what happened, he is devastated and furious in equal measure. His top man is dead, 2 of his best enforcers. The Gusenberg brothers are dead. His bookkeeper is dead. Others who are like brothers to him are dead. 7 men who were under his protection, who trusted him to keep them safe, have been murdered, and it is his fault. He was supposed to be there. He was supposed to be at that meeting. If he had not been late, if he had arrived on time, he would have been lined up against that wall with the others. He would have been machine-gunned to death alongside his men. The fact that his lateness saved his life does not comfort him. If anything, it makes the guilt worse. His men died because they were loyal to him, because they showed up when and where he told them to. He survived through random chance, through the accident of being late. When reporters catch up to Moran and ask who is responsible, he does not hesitate. "Only Capone kills like that," he says. It is a statement that will be remembered through history, expressing in 5 words what everyone in Chicago's underworld already knows. Al Capone ordered this hit. But knowing who is responsible and proving it are different things. The police investigate. They question witnesses. They collect evidence. They find nothing that can definitely connect Capone to the massacre. Capone has his alibi. He was in Florida meeting with the Miami district attorney at the exact time of the killings. His top men also have alibis carefully arranged to make sure they cannot be placed at the scene. The killers have disappeared. Some probably leave Chicago immediately, getting far away before the heat comes down. Others might stay, but keep quiet, without witnesses willing to tell, without physical evidence connecting specific people to the crime. The police have nothing they can take to court. The investigation goes nowhere. Despite being the most famous gangland killing in American history, no one is ever found guilty for the Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone gets away with it completely, at least in legal terms. But in another way, the massacre is a disaster for Capone. The public outcry is huge. People who previously tolerated or even romanticized gangsters are horrified by the brutality. The massacre makes it clear that these are not Robin Hood figures or colorful characters. They are murderers who will kill anyone in their way. Political and law enforcement pressure gets stronger. City, state, and federal authorities can no longer ignore the violence in Chicago. They have to be seen doing something, taking action against the gangs that have turned Chicago into a war zone. This attention will eventually lead to Capone's downfall, though not for the massacre itself. For Moran, the massacre is the beginning of the end. His organization has been beheaded. His best men are dead. His territory is now open, available for Capone to take over other gangsters. Seeing the North Side gang's weakness, may try to push in on their operations. Worst of all, Moran knows he is marked for death. Capone tried to kill him and failed only because of random chance. There will be more attempts. Moran will spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering when the next hit is coming. The Valentine's Day Massacre achieves Capone's goal of destroying the North Side gang, but not in the way he intended. He did not kill Moran. He did not get rid of all the leaders, but he did deliver a blow so devastating that the gang never recovers. In trying to destroy Moran's organization, Capone succeeds, even if Moran himself survives. In the days and weeks following the massacre, Moran has to make impossible decisions. Does he try to rebuild his organization? Does he go into hiding? Does he strike back at Capone, knowing that any revenge will likely lead to his death? He chooses to try to continue, to maintain what is left of his operations. It is partly pride. He refuses to let Capone drive him out of Chicago. It is partly practical. He has no other way to make a living, no legal skills to fall back on, and it is partly because some of his men survived, and they are looking to him for leadership. But rebuilding is almost impossible. The men who died were not just soldiers, they were experienced leaders, the people who made the organization work. Albert Kachalik was his second in command, his trusted advisor. Adam Hayer managed the finances, kept track of money, made sure everyone got paid. The Gusenberg brothers were his enforcers, the muscle that kept people in line. These men cannot easily be replaced. Moran tries to bring in new members, to promote surviving gang members into leadership positions. But it is not the same. The new guys do not have the experience, do not command the same respect, and potential new members can see what happened to the last group of Moran's top men. They were machine-gunned to death in a garage. Not many people are eager to sign up for that future. The money problems are immediate and severe. Speakeasies that were once in Moran's territory start buying from other suppliers. Some switch to Capone's organization. Seeing which way the wind is blowing, others become independent, no longer willing to pay protection to a gang that cannot protect itself. Money coming in drops sharply. Moran's remaining operations come under constant pressure. Capone's men raid speakeasies, hijack shipments, scare suppliers. They do not need to start another massacre. They can simply squeeze Moran's organization until nothing is left. It is death by 1,000 small cuts, and there is little Moran can do to stop it. The mental impact might be even worse than the practical damage. Moran becomes extremely suspicious, which is both understandable and dangerous. He trusts almost no one, sees betrayal everywhere. Every new face might be a killer. Every meeting might be a trap. Every car following him might be filled with gunmen. This suspicion makes him even more difficult to work with. He yells at subordinates, accuses loyal men of betrayal, makes unpredictable decisions based on suspicion rather than facts. The organization does not just lose men and money. It loses direction, purpose. Moran also has to live with survivor's guilt. Why did he survive when 7 of his men died? Was it just luck? Or was there some other reason? Some Chicago underworld figures whisper that Moran set up his own men, that he deliberately stayed away while they were killed. These rumors are almost certainly false. Moran had no reason to betray his top men, and doing so would have destroyed his organization. But the whispers continue. A police investigation continues for months. Though it goes nowhere, they bring in suspects, including several Capone associates, but they cannot make any charges stick. The lookout building where the killers waited is found, but the killers themselves have disappeared. They recovered 2 Thompson submachine guns from a Michigan house, and tests on the bullets confirmed these were the weapons used in the massacre. But connecting the weapons to specific people proves impossible. Some suspects are identified over the years. Fred Burke, a freelance hitman, is believed to have been one of the shooters. He is eventually arrested for killing a Michigan police officer. but he is never charged with the Valentine's Day Massacre. Other suspected participants include Fred Getz, Gus Winkler, and of course, Jack McGurn, though McGurn has an alibi. He was with his girlfriend, Louise Rolfe, who said she was with him all day. The press calls her the blonde alibi years later. After McGurn is killed in 1936, a Valentine's Day card is left on his body. You have lost your job. You have lost your dough, your jewels and cars and handsome houses. But things could still be worse, you know. At least you have not lost your trousers. It is signed the survivors of the Valentine's Day Massacre. Someone wanted to make sure Mick Gurn's death was connected to that famous day. But in 1929, none of this matters to Bugs Moran. He is watching his empire crumble. His men scatter, his money dries up. The North Side Gang, which once rivaled Capone's organization in power and influence, is dying, and Moran is powerless to stop it. The irony is bitter. Capone wanted to kill Moran, but by failing to do so, he did something worse. Moran gets to watch everything he built fall apart. He gets to experience the slow destruction of his life's work. Death might have been quicker and kinder. The years following the Valentine's Day Massacre are a slow decline for Bugs Moran, a man watching his world dissolve around him. The North Side Gang continues to exist in name, but it is a shadow of its former self, operating on the edges of Chicago's underworld rather than as a major power. Capone, meanwhile, becomes more powerful than ever. The massacre, despite its brutality, or perhaps because of it, makes his control over Chicago solid. Other gangs fall in line, accepting outfit control rather than risk similar treatment. The Chicago underworld becomes basically united under Capone's leadership, exactly as he had imagined. But Capone's victory is short-lived. The Valentine's Day Massacre, combined with other high-profile violence, makes him such a public threat that the federal government has no choice but to take action. President Herbert Hoover personally tells the Treasury Department to build a case against Capone, leading to the famous investigation that will ultimately bring him down, not for murder or bootlegging, but for tax evasion in 1931. Capone is found guilty of income tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. He enters the Atlanta, U.S. Penitentiary in May 1932, later being moved to Alcatraz when it opens in 1934. The man who ruled Chicago's underworld is now just another prisoner, his empire being divided among his subordinates. Moran watches these developments with mixed feelings. He is glad to see Capone behind bars, but it does not restore what he has lost. The North Side Gang is finished regardless of what happens to Capone. The organization Moran built and led is gone, destroyed by that one terrible morning in February 1929. But the biggest blow to Moran's fortunes comes not from gangster violence, but from political change. On December 5, 1933, the 21st Amendment to the Constitution is approved, canceling the 18th Amendment. Prohibition is over. Alcohol is legal again. For most Americans, this is a reason to celebrate. For bootleggers like Moran, it is a disaster. The entire business model that made them wealthy has just been wiped out. Overnight, the speakeasies, the illegal breweries, the smuggling operations, all of it becomes useless. Legal businesses can now make and sell alcohol legally with proper licenses and without the risk of arrest. Some gangsters successfully changed to other rackets: gambling, prostitution, labor racketeering, drug dealing. The organizational skills and lack of mercy that made them successful bootleggers served them well in other criminal activities. But Moran never makes this change effectively. He is too set in his ways. too damaged by the losses he suffered, too mentally scarred by the massacre and its aftermath. His money situation gets worse rapidly. The money he made during the Prohibition years is gone, spent on fancy living, lost to bad investments, stolen by associates who see he is weak and open to attack. By the mid-1930s, Moran is no longer a wealthy gang boss. He is increasingly desperate, looking for any way to make money. He tries to keep some criminal operations going, but he is no longer a major player. He is doing small-time rackets, minor cons, petty crimes. It is a humiliating decline for someone who once controlled a multi-million-dollar criminal empire. The other gangsters, the ones who remember when Moran was a power in Chicago, see him as a warning story. This is what happens when you lose. His personal life also falls apart. His marriage to Lucille, already troubled during his successful years, cannot survive his decline. They separate, and Moran finds himself alone, without family, without close friends, without the organization that gave his life structure and meaning. He moves from Chicago to other cities, trying to find opportunities, trying to stay ahead of his creditors and enemies. He spends time in Minnesota, in Ohio, in various Midwestern cities. He is running now, always running, never able to settle down, never able to rebuild. The man who survived the Valentine's Day Massacre is experiencing a different kind of death. The slow death of dreams, of reputation, of self-respect. In some ways, it is worse than the quick death his 7 men experienced that February morning. They died as members of a powerful organization, loyal to their boss, respected by their peers. Moran lives as a has-been, a former somebody who is now nobody. By the early 1940s, Moran is in his late 40s, an age when most men are established in their careers, settled in their lives. But Moran has nothing. No legal job, no savings, no future. He has survived when many of his contemporaries have died. But he is starting to wonder if survival was worth it. He is drinking heavily, trying to dull the memories, the guilt, the regret. He drinks to forget the faces of the 7 men who died in his place, to stop hearing the sound of gunfire in his nightmares, to escape the knowledge that his life peaked 2 decades ago and everything since has been decline. The drinking makes everything worse. It clouds his judgment, makes him more suspicious, interferes with what little criminal work he can still find. People who might have hired him for jobs decide he is too unreliable, too unstable. The man who was once known for his toughness and lack of fear is now seen as a sad drunk. Living on past glories, they become less impressive with each passing year. He is arrested several times during this period for minor offenses: public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, petty theft. The arrests are embarrassing, a public display of how far he has fallen. The newspapers occasionally mention that he is the former head of the North Side Gang, the man who survived the Valentine's Day Massacre. But now he is just another drunk being brought into night court. Money becomes a constant pressing problem. During his glory days, Moran had money to burn. He tipped generously, bought drinks for everyone, never thought twice about spending. Now he is counting pennies, borrowing small amounts from old associates who feel sorry for him, looking for any way to get cash. This desperation leads him to consider crimes he never would have touched during his powerful years. Armed robbery, unsophisticated, risky, the kind of thing that desperate amateurs do. But Moran is desperate, and he needs money, so he starts planning a robbery. In July 1946, Moran and 2 associates rob a bank messenger in Dayton, Ohio, stealing $10,000. It is a significant amount of money. equal to well over $100,000 in today's dollars. But it is also a sloppy job. The three robbers are quickly identified and arrested. The trial is a sad sight. Here is Bugs Moran, once one of the most feared gangsters in America, being tried for a relatively minor robbery. The prosecutor makes a big deal of Moran's history, his connection to the Valentine's Day Massacre, his years as a gang leader. But that history also makes him seem more pathetic. How has this former crime boss been reduced to robbing bank messengers? Moran is found guilty and sentenced to 10 years at the Ohio State Penitentiary. He is 53 years old when he enters prison, past the age when most men retire. He is starting a 10-year prison sentence with no realistic hope of rebuilding his life when he gets out. Prison is hard on Moran. He is not young anymore, not as tough as he used to be. The other prisoners know who he is. The man who ran the North Side gang, who survived the Valentine's Day Massacre. But that history does not buy him much respect. He is just another old convict doing time. Nothing special. He serves his sentence. Day by day, year by year. No visitors, no mail, no connection to the outside world. The few people who might have visited him are dead or have moved on with their lives. He has been forgotten by everyone except historians and true crime fans. In 1956, Moran is released from prison after serving his full sentence. He is 63 years old, a senior citizen by the standards of the time. Most men his age are thinking about retirement, spending time with grandchildren, enjoying the results of a lifetime's work. Moran has nothing. No money, no home, no family, no future. He is released into a world that is dramatically different from the one he knew. The 1950s America he steps into has nothing in common with the Chicago of the 1920s. The underworld he knew is gone, replaced by new organizations with different methods. The few old-timers who remember him are dying off. He is a leftover from a past time, a man out of place. Moran makes a weak attempt to go straight. He tries to find legal work. But who is going to hire a 63-year-old man with no job skills and a long criminal record? He is not qualified for anything legal. And even if he were, his name carries too much baggage. Employers see George Moran on an application and remember the headlines from decades earlier. Without legal options, he returns to what he knows: crime. But he is old now, slower, less sharp. The fire that drove him during his powerful years has dimmed. He is committing crimes not because he wants to, but because he does not know how to do anything else. On December 19, 1956, just months after being released from his previous prison sentence, Moran is arrested again. This time it is for bank robbery. A job in Ansonia, Ohio, where he and an associate tried to rob a bank and got away with less than $1,000. It is a sad amount for such a high-risk crime, and the robbery is so poorly done that they are caught almost immediately. The arrest is the final humiliation. Bugs Moran, who once controlled a multi-million-dollar criminal empire, is arrested for a messed-up bank robbery that got less than $1,000. The newspapers cover the story, and the tone is one of pity mixed with satisfaction at someone's downfall. Look how far the mighty have fallen. At his trial, Moran is a sad figure. He is old, tired, defeated. The prosecutor does not need to work very hard. The evidence is clear. And Moran does not have the resources for a strong defense. He is found guilty and sentenced to 10 more years in federal prison. This time, he is sent to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Kansas, one of the toughest federal prisons in the country. It is a brutal place designed for hardened criminals, and Moran is entering it as an elderly man with health problems. The conditions at Leavenworth are harsh. The prison is overcrowded, has too few guards, and is violent. Younger prisoners take advantage of older ones, and Moran, despite his fearsome reputation from decades earlier, is open to attack. He is not the tough young gangster who fought his way through Chicago's underworld. He is an old man serving out his final years. Moran's health gets worse quickly in prison. The poor food, not enough medical care, and stress of being locked up take their toll. He develops a chronic cough that will not go away, loses weight, becomes increasingly weak. He asks to see a doctor. But prison medical care in the 1950s is minimal at best. His requests are often ignored or delayed. By early 1957, Moran is seriously ill. He is having trouble breathing, coughing constantly, feeling chest pain. The prison medical staff finally examines him and gives the diagnosis: lung cancer, advanced, and cannot be operated on. There is nothing they can do. He is dying. The diagnosis of lung cancer is basically a death sentence in 1957. Modern cancer treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, advanced surgeries are still in their early stages. For an elderly prisoner with advanced lung cancer, there is no hope of survival, only the question of how long he has left. Moran receives this news with the acceptance that is almost peaceful. He has been running for so long, fighting for so long, surviving for so long. Now he can stop. Death is coming, and there is nothing he can do about it. Nothing he needs to do about it. For a man who spent his entire adult life in constant struggle, there is a strange relief in giving up. He is moved to the prison hospital, such as it is. The accommodations are not much better than regular prison, but at least he has a bed and access to pain medication when the pain becomes unbearable. The staff does what little they can to keep him comfortable, but comfort is relative in a place like Leavenworth. Moran has time to think during these final weeks. He thinks about his life, about the choices he made, about the paths not taken. What if he had stayed in Minnesota, avoided Chicago entirely? What if he had gone straight after his early arrests, found legal work? What if he had not been late that morning in February 1929? That last question troubles him especially. The Valentine's Day Massacre, defining the rest of his life. If he had been on time, he would have died alongside his men, machine-gunned to death at age 35. He would have died wealthy, powerful at the height of his influence. Would that have been better than surviving to experience decades of decline? To die old and alone in a prison hospital? He thinks about the men who died in his place: Frank and Peter Gusenberg, Albert Kechelik, Adam Heyer, Albert Weinschenk, Reinhard Schwimmer, John May, 7 men who trusted him, who showed up when and where he told them, who died while he lived. He never forgot their faces, never escaped the guilt of surviving when they did not. He thinks about Al Capone, the man who ordered the massacre, who destroyed Moran's empire. Capone is already dead by this point. He died in January 1947 at his home in Florida, his brain destroyed by syphilis. The man who ruled Chicago's underworld spent his final years as a mental invalid, barely able to recognize his own family. There is a grim justice in that, though it does not undo anything that happened. Moran wonders who else from the old days is still alive. Most of them are dead, killed by rivals, executed by the state, or simply worn down by the criminal life. The few survivors have either gone straight or are in prison like him. The world they knew, the Chicago of the 1920s with its speakeasies and gang wars, is as dead as they soon will be. Does he have regrets? The question seems almost silly. His entire life after age 35 has been one long regret. A slow fall from power to poverty. From respect to pity, of course, he has regrets. He regrets becoming a criminal, regrets not dying with his men, regrets surviving to experience this humiliating end. But there is also a stubborn pride that will not quite die. He survived when everyone said he would not. He outlived Capone, outlived most of his enemies and allies. He experienced things, the wealth, the power, the excitement of the Prohibition era that few people ever get to experience. The price was high, but he paid it. He has nothing left but his memories. And some of those memories at least are worth having. Bugs Moran dies on February 25, 1957, in the prison hospital at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary. He is 63 years old. The immediate cause of death is lung cancer. But really, he is dying of everything. Age, illness, a lifetime of bad choices. The collected weight of decades of violence and stress. There is no ceremony, no gathering of people to mourn, no fancy funeral. He dies alone as he has lived for years. The prison authorities tell the appropriate agencies, process the paperwork, dispose of the body according to normal procedures. It is a routine process empty of emotion or meaning. The newspapers carry short obituaries. Bugs Moran, former gang leader, dies in prison, reads one headline. The stories sum up his life in a few paragraphs. The North Side Gang, the Valentine's Day Massacre, his survival and later decline, his final years in prison. They are factual, but done quickly. Moran is not important enough anymore to deserve extensive coverage. There are no tears shed for Bugs Moran. His family, what little is left of it, has long since kept away from him. His former associates are dead, or have moved on with their lives. The people who remember him as a powerful gang boss are dying off, and younger generations know him only as a historical footnote. He is buried in a pauper's grave, later moved to Leavenworth Cemetery. No fancy headstone, no monument, just a simple marker with his name and dates. It is a far cry from the lavish funeral given to Diane O'Banion back in 1924, with its 26 cars of flowers and 10,000 people mourning. Moran's death barely registers. The contrast between his life and death is stark. During his peak years, from roughly 1927 to 1929, Moran was one of the most feared men in America. He controlled significant criminal operations, commanded loyalty from dangerous men, made and spent enormous amounts of money. He was somebody respected by allies, feared by enemies, known by everyone. At his death, he is nobody, just another elderly prisoner dying of cancer. One more victim of the criminal life that chews people up and spits them out. The world has moved on without him. Chicago's underworld has been reshaped by new players with new methods. Bugs Moran is a leftover from a past time, and his death is simply the final inevitable end to a life that went wrong decades earlier. The ultimate irony of Bugs Moran's life is this. He survived the Valentine's Day Massacre, the event that was supposed to kill him, only to experience something worse than death. He lived for 28 more years after that February morning. But they were years of decline, desperation, and humiliation. His 7 men who died in the massacre were spared all that. They died quickly, probably without even realizing what was happening until the last seconds. They died as members of a powerful organization, respected in their world, loyal to their boss. They died when they were still somebody. Moran survived to become nobody. He watched his empire crumble, his money disappear, his reputation fade. He experienced poverty, imprisonment, and the slow wearing away of everything that once defined him. He lived long enough to see Al Capone die, to see Prohibition ended. to see the world he knew disappear completely. There is a question historians sometimes ask. Was Bugs Moran lucky or unlucky to survive the Valentine's Day Massacre? The obvious answer is lucky. He lived when he should have died. But looking at what his life became after that day, the answer is not so clear. If Moran had been on time that morning, if he had walked into that garage and been lined up against the wall with the others, he would be remembered differently. He would be one of the victims of the most famous gangland killing in American history. There would be sympathy for him, perhaps even a kind of respect. His death would have had meaning, would have been part of a larger story about the violence of Prohibition-era Chicago. Instead, he survived to become a warning story. He is remembered not for his years of power, but for his decades of decline. He is the man who escaped death only to lose everything anyway. He is proof that sometimes survival is not the victory it seems to be. The Valentine's Day Massacre destroyed Bugs Moran more effectively than the bullets could have. It killed his organization, killed his reputation, killed his future. It left him alive but emptied out. A man going through the motions of living without any real purpose or direction. What is Bugs Moran's legacy? What does his life teach us about the criminal world? About ambition? About survival? First, it shows the brutality and violence of Prohibition-era organized crime. The Valentine's Day Massacre was not something unusual. It was the logical extreme of the system, where arguments are settled with bullets, where power comes from the barrel of a gun, where human life is cheap and easily thrown away. Moran lived in that world, did well in it for a time, and ultimately was destroyed by it second. It shows that winning is not the same as surviving. Moran survived when his men died, but he did not win. He lost his organization, his wealth, his freedom, ultimately his life. Survival without victory can be worse than a quick death. A lesson that Moran learned over the course of decades. Third, it shows how quickly fortunes can change in the criminal world. In 1928, Moran was a millionaire gang boss, powerful and feared. By 1930, he was a broken man watching his empire fall apart. The criminal life offers the possibility of great rewards, but those rewards are always temporary, always at risk. Always one bullet or one bad decision away from disappearing. Fourth, it shows that the criminal life rarely ends well. Moran's story is depressing because it is so typical. Most gangsters from his era ended up dead, in prison, or poor. The lucky ones like Capone at least got to enjoy their wealth for a while before the end came. Moran got to watch his slow-motion destruction over decades. The Valentine's Day Massacre itself remains one of the most famous crimes in American history. The image of 7 men lined up against a wall and machine-gunned to death has become famous, representing the violence and brutality of the gangster era. The massacre has been shown in countless movies, television shows, books, and documentaries. It has become a symbol, a quick way to understand what life was like in Prohibition-era Chicago. But the massacre is also a crime that was never officially solved. No one was ever found guilty. The killers escaped justice, and Al Capone, who almost certainly ordered the hit, never faced legal consequences for it. This failure of justice is itself part of the legacy. A reminder that in Prohibition-era Chicago, gangsters could commit spectacular crimes and get away with them. Moran's place in history is made certain by the massacre. He is forever linked to that February morning, forever defined by his absence from a place where he should have been. Everything else about his life, his years as a gang leader, his criminal career, his final decline, is secondary to that one day. He became a historical figure, not because of what he did, but because of what was done to his organization while he was not there. There is something almost like a Shakespeare play about his story. A powerful man brought low, surviving his greatest test only to face slow destruction, living long enough to see all his works turn to dust. It is a tragedy in the classic sense, a tale of ambition, violence, and ultimate defeat. In trying to understand Bugs Moran, we have to deal with a basic contradiction. He was both a human being and a monster. He was capable of loyalty, friendship, even love. He took care of his men's families, remembered small kindnesses, could be generous and charming. But he was also a cold-blooded killer who personally murdered many people and ordered the deaths of many more. This contradiction is not unique to Moran. Many gangsters of his time show the same two sides. Human in some ways, monstrous in others, they exist in a world with different rules, where violence is just business, where killing is not personal, where loyalty to your organization beats all other moral considerations. The question is whether we can understand these men without making them seem better than they were. Movies and television often show gangsters as anti-heroes, rebels against an unfair system, men of honor in a dishonorable world. The reality is usually much darker. These were criminals who hurt people, destroyed lives, corrupted institutions, and kept cycles of violence going. Moran hurt a lot of people during his years in power. The speakeasy owners who had to pay protection money, the competitors who were driven out of business or killed, the families of his victims, all of them suffered because of him. The fact that he ultimately suffered himself does not erase that harm. At the same time, he was a product of his environment and times. He grew up poor in a world where legal success was difficult and criminal success was possible. He came of age in an era when Prohibition created huge opportunities for criminals. He learned violence from a violent world, and he used the methods everyone around him was using. This is not to excuse his actions. Moran made choices, and he is responsible for those choices. But it helps explain how a boy named Adelaide Cunyon became the gangster known as Bugs Moran. He was not born a criminal. He was made into one by circumstances, choices, and the company he kept. The Chicago he operated in was a city where organized crime was woven into the fabric of society. Police took bribes. Politicians were corrupt. Judges could be bought. The line between legal business and criminal activity was often blurry. In that environment, becoming a gangster was not a radical departure from social norms. It was just choosing one path among several available options. But the criminal path, for all its potential rewards, almost never ends well. Moran's story shows this with brutal clarity. He had 20 years of success, give or take, from the early 1910s when he first came to Chicago until 1929 when the massacre destroyed his organization. After that, it was 30 years of decline, ending in a prison hospital bed, alone and forgotten. Was it worth it? That is a question only Moran could answer. And he is long dead. But looking at the path of his life, it is hard to see how anyone could conclude the rewards were worth the price. Before we finish, we should remember the 7 men who died on February 14th, 1929. They are often reduced to numbers, 7 victims of a famous crime. But each was a person with a life, family, hopes, and dreams. Frank Gusenberg was 36 when he died, an experienced enforcer who had served the North Side Gang for years. He was tough, loyal, and professional. He survived being shot 14 times long enough to refuse to cooperate with police. Keeping the code of silence even as he died, his brother Peter died beside him. Peter Gusenberg was 33. equally tough and loyal. The brothers were close, operating as a team. Watching each other's backs, they died together, which perhaps gave some small comfort. Albert Kachalik, known as James Clark, was Moran's second in command at 44. He was experienced, intelligent, trusted with significant responsibility. He had probably been with the gang for most of his adult life. His death removed a key pillar of the organization. Adam Heyer was the bookkeeper at 44, the man who kept track of money and made sure the money side of operations ran smoothly. In modern terms, he was the CFO of a multi-million-dollar criminal business. His death was a significant practical blow to the gang. Albert Weinshank managed speakeasies at 36. His similarity to Moran probably triggered the hit. The lookouts saw him and thought Moran had arrived. He died because he looked like someone else. A cruel twist of fate. Reinhard Schwimmer was an eye doctor at 29 who had a legal business that liked hanging around gangsters. He found the criminal life exciting, glamorous. It got him killed. His death is especially sad because he was not really a gangster, just a regular person who made a fatal mistake in choosing his friends. John May was a mechanic at 34 working on a truck that morning. He had a wife and 7 children at home. He was the least involved with the gang of any of the victims. Just a working man doing a job. His dog Highball, who had come with him that morning, survived to howl over his dead body. These 7 men deserve to be remembered as more than just victims of the Valentine's Day Massacre. They were people with all the complexity that implies. Some were cold-blooded killers who committed terrible crimes. Some were relatively minor players who had made bad choices about the company they kept. All of them died violently, brutally before their time. Their deaths accomplished what Al Capone intended: the destruction of the North Side Gang as an effective organization. But their deaths also shocked America, helped lead to the end of Prohibition, and helped bring down Capone himself. The massacre was supposed to be a show of power. Instead, it showed that the gangster era had gone too far, that the violence had become unbearable, that something had to change in that way. The 7 men's deaths were not entirely meaningless. They became symbols of the chaos and brutality of Prohibition-era Chicago. Their massacre helped turn public opinion against the gangsters who had been romanticized in popular culture. They helped indirectly to the eventual end of Prohibition and the cleaning up of Chicago's underworld. It is little comfort for their families, but it is something. Their deaths had results beyond what Capone intended. Results that ultimately worked against the interests of organized crime. Bugs Moran lived for 28 years after the Valentine's Day Massacre. He survived when he should have died, escaped when he should have been caught, alive when most of his generation ended up dead or in prison. But survival did not mean victory. It just meant he got to experience a longer, slower defeat. The story of Bugs Moran is ultimately a story about the cost of survival. He paid for those extra 28 years with his empire, his money, his freedom, his dignity, and ultimately his life in a prison hospital. He became a warning story, an example of how even winning can be a kind of loss when we look at his life as a whole. From his birth as Adlard Tunin in 1893 to his death as Bugs Moran in 1957, we see an arc that starts with promise, rises to power, and then falls into despair. It is a path that many criminals experience, but few survive long enough to complete. Moran's survival meant he had to live through all of it. All the way to the bitter end, he saw the rise and fall of Prohibition, saw an entire era of American history come and go. He knew the Chicago underworld at its peak, when gangsters operated openly when violence was routine, when huge amounts of money flowed through illegal channels. He also lived to see that world disappear, replaced by a different kind of organized crime, operating in different ways. The Valentine's Day Massacre remains his defining moment, the event that overshadows everything else about his life. When people remember Bugs Moran, and fewer people remember him with each passing year, they remember him as the man who was not there, the man who was late, the man who survived. Everything else about him, all his years of power and decades of decline, become footnotes to that one February morning. There is a certain poetry to this. Moran spent most of his adult life trying to be somebody, to make a name for himself, to build something lasting. He succeeded in a way. He is remembered. His name is in the history books. But he is remembered not for what he did, but for what happened when he was not there. His greatest moment of fame comes from his absence. The massacre also shows the randomness that underlies so much of life. Criminal or otherwise, if Moran had been on time that morning, everything would have been different. The North Side gang would have been beheaded, Moran would have been dead, and his story would have ended there. Instead, he was late, and his story continued for 3 more decades. Was this random chance, or was there some larger pattern at work? Moran probably wondered about this during his final years. Why did he survive when his men died? Was there some purpose to his survival? Some reason he was spared? Or was it just dumb luck, a meaningless accident that happened to keep him alive? Looking at what his life became after the massacre, it is hard to see any grand purpose in his survival. He did not use his extra years to do anything meaningful. He did not reform, did not find redemption, did not make up for his crimes. He just kept going, getting older and weaker, committing smaller and more desperate crimes, until he ended up dying alone in a prison hospital. Perhaps the purpose was simply this, to serve as an example, to show what happens when you choose the criminal path. Moran's story is not glamorous or romantic. It is a story of violence, loss, and ultimate defeat. It is a story that should discourage people from following in his footsteps. Though whether it actually does is another question. It is worth comparing Moran's fate to that of Al Capone, the man who ordered his death and destroyed his organization. On the surface, Capone seems to have done better. He achieved greater power, collected more wealth, became more famous. At his peak, Capone was arguably the most powerful criminal in America, controlling Chicago's underworld with an iron fist. But Capone's end was arguably worse than Moran's. He was found guilty of tax evasion in 1931 and sent to federal prison. He served time first in Atlanta, then in Alcatraz, where the harsh conditions made his physical and mental decline faster. The syphilis he had caught years earlier, left untreated, destroyed his brain. When Capone was released from prison in 1939, he was a shadow of his former self. The disease had taken away his mental abilities. He spent his final years at his house in Florida, often confused, sometimes not making sense. Unable to recognize old friends or do basic business, he died in 1947 at age 48. His brain so damaged that he had the mental ability of a 12-year-old child. So, who had the worse fate? Moran, who survived to experience decades of decline and die in prison, or Capone, who achieved greater success, but ended as a mental invalid? It is an impossible question to answer, but it shows that in the criminal world, there are no good endings. You either die young and violent, or you live long enough to experience some form of humiliation and defeat. Both men paid heavy prices for their choices. Both ended up far from where they started, far from where they thought they would end up. Both discovered that the criminal life, for all its potential rewards, ultimately destroys everyone who chooses it. The difference is that Capone at least got to enjoy his success for a while. He had years of wealth, power, and influence before it all came crashing down. Moran's time at the top was brief, and most of his adult life was spent in decline. In that way, Capone got the better deal, even if his final years were perhaps more degrading than Moran's. The Valentine's Day Massacre has taken on a life of its own in American culture, becoming a symbol, a quick reference, a piece of mythology. It represents the violence of the Prohibition era, the brutality of the gangster wars, the chaos of a time when law and order seemed to have broken down completely. The massacre has been shown in countless films, television shows, and books. Some portrayals are fairly accurate, while others take significant liberties with the facts. The garage at 2122 North Clark Street became a creepy tourist attraction, with people visiting the site where 7 men were murdered. The building was eventually torn down in 1967, and the bricks were bought by a Canadian businessman who tried to rebuild the wall in various places, only to have money problems and claims that the bricks were cursed. This turning of the massacre into a story has both kept its memory alive and changed it. The real event, 7 men murdered in a garage on a cold February morning, becomes changed into legend, into symbol, into entertainment. The men who died become characters in a story rather than real people who had lives, families, hopes, and dreams. Bugs Moran's role in this mythology is complicated. He is important because he survived, because his survival gives the story an extra dimension. He is the one who got away, the one who lived to tell the tale, the one who gives a view on what the massacre meant. But he is also somewhat disappointing from a storytelling view. Because his survival did not lead anywhere interesting, he did not get revenge, did not rebuild his empire, did not find redemption. He just declines slowly until he died in prison. If this were fiction, we might expect Moran's survival to be the setup for some larger story. He survives the massacre, learns from the experience, and comes back stronger. Or he survives, realizes the emptiness of the criminal life, and reforms. Or he survives, plans his revenge, and ultimately takes down Capone in some spectacular way. But real life does not follow story rules. Moran survived, and then not much. He continued as best he could until he could not continue anymore. His story does not have the shape we expect from fiction. It just trails off into anticlimax and death. Perhaps that is the most important lesson of his story. Real life does not have to make story sense. Sometimes people survive for no reason. Sometimes survival does not lead to triumph or tragedy, just to more survival until death finally arrives. Sometimes the story does not have a satisfying ending. It just ends. When Moran died in 1957, the world was vastly different from the one he had known during his years of power. The Chicago underworld had changed completely. The old-style gangs that had fought territorial wars during Prohibition were gone, replaced by more advanced criminal organizations that operated more like businesses. The outfit, the organization that grew out of Capone's empire, was still powerful, but it operated differently. The days of open gang warfare were over. Violence still happened, but it was more targeted, more careful. The new generation of gangsters wore suits and ties, operated through fake companies, cleaned money through legal businesses. They were criminals, but they tried hard not to look like criminals. Prohibition was long gone, and with it, the bootlegging industry that had made men like Moran and Capone wealthy. The outfit had spread into other rackets: gambling, prostitution, labor racketeering, loan sharking, and increasingly drug dealing. These were less profitable than bootlegging had been at its peak, but they were enough to keep the organization wealthy and powerful. The political scene had changed, too. The corruption that had been routine in the 1920s, where whole police departments and political machines were on gangster payrolls, had been somewhat cleaned up, not gone. Chicago politics remained famously corrupt, but brought under better control. The days when gangsters could operate without fear, sure that their political connections would protect them, were over. American culture had also moved on from the gangster era. The 1950s were a time of supposed fitting in and respectability, very different from the wild 1920s. The generation that had lived through Prohibition, who remembered speakeasies and gangster wars, was getting old. Younger Americans knew about that era only through history books and movies. Moran died as a leftover from a past time, a man whose time had passed. The world had no place for men like him anymore. The style of gangsterism he represented, violent, territorial, based on personal loyalty and face-to-face relationships, had been made useless by changing times and more advanced criminal organizations. In a way, it is fitting that he died in prison, removed from the world he had known. He would not have recognized or understood the world of 1957 anyway. He belonged to the 1920s, and that era had died long before he did. If we are honest, Bugs Moran's life was largely wasted. He had intelligence, courage, and leadership ability, qualities that could have led to success in legal fields. But he chose crime, and that choice led to violence, prison, and a lonely death far from home. What did he accomplish? He built a criminal empire that lasted less than a decade. He made and spent a fortune. He survived when he should have died. But what lasting positive effect did he have on the world? What did he create or give that made anyone's life better? The answer is nothing. He was a net negative for society. A man who hurt people, corrupted institutions, and spread violence and fear. The world would have been better off if he had never existed, or if he had chosen a different path. This is the hard truth about criminal lives like Moran's. They might seem exciting or glamorous from a distance, and there is no denying that men like Moran experience things that most people never will. The rush of danger, the thrill of power, the satisfaction of wealth, but the price is too high, and the ending is always bad. Moran died at 63, which is not particularly young by the standards of his time, but he could have lived longer if not for the stress, the violence, the drinking, the poor conditions in prison. He could have spent his final years with family, with friends, with some dignity and comfort. Instead, he died alone in a prison hospital, his body destroyed by cancer, his life a testament to bad choices and wasted potential. There is a temptation to make men like Moran seem romantic, to see them as rebels against society, as men who lived by their own rules and refused to fit in. But this romanticizing ignores the reality of what their lives actually were. They were criminals who hurt people. They did not live by a code of honor. They lived by a code of self-interest and violence. They were not heroes. They were predators. Moran's story should be a warning, not an inspiration. It should show young people what happens when you choose crime, when you think violence is the answer, when you put money and power above everything else. It should show that even if you survive, even if you escape death time and again, you still lose in the end. Who is Bugs Moran really? Putting aside the mythology, the legend, the Hollywood portrayals, who was the actual human being? He was a man of opposites, loyal to his friends, but capable of terrible violence, generous to those close to him, but without mercy to enemies and rivals, intelligent in some ways, but lacking the wisdom to see where his choices would lead, brave to the point of being careless, but also likely to be suspicious and afraid. He was a product of his time and place, shaped by the neighborhoods he grew up in, the men he met, the opportunities he saw. In a different time or a different city, he might have become something else. But in early 20th century Chicago, in the world of Prohibition and gangster wars, he became Bugs Moran. He had a temper that got him into trouble throughout his life. His nickname Bugs, whether it meant crazy or unpredictable or something else, was well-deserved. He could go from joking to violent in seconds, could make decisions based on emotion instead of logic, could hold grudges and keep anger long past the point of reason. But he was also capable of loyalty and friendship. The men who worked for him were not just employees. They were brothers in arms, people he cared about and felt responsible for. When they died in the Valentine's Day Massacre, his grief was real. The guilt he felt about surviving when they died was not made up. It troubled him for the rest of his life. He enjoyed the signs of success: the money, the cars, the clothes, the lifestyle. But these things never quite brought the satisfaction he hoped for. There was always something missing, some emptiness that money could not fill. This is common among people who achieve success through crime. The methods they use to get what they want spoil the enjoyment of having it. In his later years, broken and poor, he probably thought a lot about the choices he had made. Did he regret becoming a criminal? Did he wish he had taken a different path? Or did he still believe, despite everything, that he had made the right choices and was just unlucky in how things turned out? We cannot know what he thought in those final days in the Leavenworth Prison Hospital. We cannot know if he found any peace, any acceptance, any understanding of why his life had gone the way it did. We can only know that he died alone, far from home. His life a warning for anyone tempted by the criminal life. On February 14th, 1929, at about 10:30 in the morning, 7 men were murdered in a garage on North Clark Street in Chicago. It was a brutal, cold-blooded execution, the result of years of gang warfare, the result of one man's determination to get rid of his rivals. An 8th man who should have been there was running late. Being late saved his life but destroyed his empire. He would live for another 28 years, watching everything he built crumble, experiencing the slow death of his dreams and ambitions. That man was George Clarence Moran, known to the world as Bugs. He was born Adelaide Cunin on August 21st, 1893, in St. Paul, Minnesota. He died on February 25th, 1957, in Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, Kansas. In between those two dates, he lived a life full of violence, ambition, power, and ultimately defeat. He ruled Chicago's North Side for a short time, commanded dangerous men, made and spent a fortune. He survived assassination attempts, gang wars, and the Valentine's Day Massacre itself. But he did not survive his own choices, his own nature, his own inability to see that the life he had chosen could only end badly. Today, the garage where the massacre took place is gone. Torn down long ago, the bricks that formed the death wall were sold and scattered. Most of the people in that era, gangsters, cops, politicians, are dead. Their stories fading from memory. Even Chicago itself has changed beyond recognition. Changed from an industrial city with widespread crime to a modern city with different problems. But the story continues. The Valentine's Day Massacre remains one of the most famous crimes in American history, and Bugs Moran remains forever linked to it. The man who was not there, the last man standing, His life is a reminder that survival is not always the goal. Sometimes what you survive to experience is worse than death. Sometimes being late is both a blessing and a curse. Sometimes the worst fate is not to die with your comrades, but to live on alone, watching your world disappear. George Bugs Moran survived the most famous gangland massacre in American history. He lived for nearly 3 more decades after that February morning. But in the ways that mattered, he died that day along with his men. The rest was just his body taking 28 years to catch up with what his spirit already knew. He was late, and being late saved his life, but destroyed everything he had built. And that is the complete story of Bugs Moran, the gangster who survived the most famous mob hit in history, only to lose everything in the years that followed. From the heights of Chicago's bootlegging empire to dying alone in a prison cell, Moran's life reminds us that in the underworld, survival does not always mean victory. Sometimes it just means a slower, longer defeat. If you made it this far, you are a true crime history legend. You have just spent hours going deep into one of the most interesting and sad stories from the Prohibition era. Drop a comment telling me what surprised you most about Moran's story. Was it his survival of the massacre, the decades of decline that followed, or something else entirely? What do you think? Was Bugs Moran lucky or unlucky to survive that February morning? Would it have been better to die quickly at his peak, or to live for decades experiencing the slow wearing away of everything he had built? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Should I cover more gangsters from this time? Let me know who you want to hear about next. Al Capone's full story, Johnny Torrio, the rise and fall of Lucky Luciano, the creation of the Commission and modern organized crime. There are so many interesting stories from this period. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more stories like this one. Hit that bell icon so you never miss when I upload a new video. Thanks for spending these hours with me, exploring the life of a man who survived when he should have died, but could not survive his own choices. Whether you are going to sleep now or continuing with your day, I hope this story gave you something to think about. Sleep well, or wherever your day takes you. I will see you in the next story.